Sarah Martinez stood at the gates of Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the paperwork that would change her life forever. At 17 years old, she looked even younger than her age, with her slight frame and nervous smile. The security guard looked at her documents twice, clearly confused about why a teenage girl was requesting access to one of the most elite military training facilities in the world. The morning sun cast long shadows across the compound as Sarah made her way to the visitor registration building. She had been invited to participate in a special civilian marksmanship demonstration program, something the Navy had recently started to improve community relations. The program allowed skilled civilian shooters to visit the base, learn from military instructors, and showcase their abilities. Sarah had qualified through her local shooting club, where she had been quietly dominating competitions for the past 3 years. As she walked across the base, Sarah could hear the sounds of intense training echoing from various buildings. The rhythmic chanting of recruits, running in formation, the sharp crack of gunfire from the shooting ranges, and the occasional shout of instruction from drill sergeants created a symphony of military precision that both excited and intimidated her. Sarah had grown up in a small town in Texas, where her father owned a gun shop and shooting range. From the time she could hold a rifle steady, her father had taught her the fundamentals of marksmanship. What started as weekend bonding time quickly revealed itself to be something extraordinary. Sarah had a natural gift that seemed to defy explanation. Her hand-eye coordination was exceptional, her breathing control was instinctive, and her ability to calculate wind speed and bullet drop was almost supernatural. By age 14, Sarah was outgunning adults at local competitions. By 15, she was setting state records in multiple shooting disciplines. Her reputation had grown throughout the shooting community. But she had never faced the kind of elite military marksman she was about to encounter at the naval base. The demonstration was scheduled to take place at the base's premier shooting facility, a state-of-the-art range where Navy SEALs honed their sniper skills. As Sarah entered the building, she was greeted by Commander James Rodriguez, a weathered veteran who oversaw the marksmanship training programs. His expression was polite, but skeptical, as he shook her hand. "You must be Sarah," Commander Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the authority of decades of military service. "I have to admit, when I saw your application, I was surprised. We don't usually get participants quite so young." Sarah nodded, trying to project confidence despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Thank you for having me, sir. I'm really excited to learn from your instructors." Commander Rodriguez led her through the facility, explaining the various ranges and training areas. The building was impressive, with multiple lanes capable of accommodating long-range shooting out to 1,500 meters. The walls were lined with targets, charts showing ballistic calculations, and photographs of distinguished marksmen who had trained there over the years. As they walked, Sarah noticed a group of men in military fatigues gathered around one of the shooting benches. Their conversation stopped as she approached, and she could feel their eyes studying her with obvious skepticism. These were Navy SEALs, among the most elite warriors in the world, and their initial reaction to her presence was not welcoming. "Gentlemen," Commander Rodriguez called out, "I'd like you to meet Sarah Martinez. She's here as part of our civilian demonstration program." The tallest of the SEALs, a man with sergeant stripes, who appeared to be in his early 30s, stepped forward. His name tag read Thompson, and his expression was somewhere between amused and annoyed. "Commander, with all due respect," Sergeant Thompson said, "we've got serious training to complete today. We're preparing for deployment next month, and every minute of range time is crucial." "I understand your concerns, Sergeant," Commander Rodriguez replied firmly. "But this demonstration is important for community outreach, and I expect your full cooperation." Sarah could feel the tension in the air. The other SEALs were exchanging glances and barely concealed smirks. One of them, a younger man with corporal stripes, whispered something to his buddy that made them both chuckle. "If you say so, sir," Thompson replied, his tone suggesting he disagreed but would follow orders. "What exactly are we supposed to be demonstrating?" Commander Rodriguez consulted his clipboard. "The plan is for Miss Martinez to observe your standard marksmanship drills. Then you'll provide some basic instruction before she takes a few shots herself." The reaction from the SEALs was immediate and unmistakable. Several of them laughed outright, while others shook their heads in disbelief. Thompson's expression hardened, and he took a step closer to Sarah. "Look, kid," Thompson said, his voice condescending. "I don't know what kind of shooting you've done back home, but this isn't a carnival game. These are military-grade weapons designed for combat situations. Maybe you should stick to watching from the observation deck." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had faced skepticism before, though never quite this hostile. "I appreciate your concern, Sergeant, but I'd really like to try if that's okay." The corporal who had been whispering earlier spoke up. "What's your experience, sweetheart? BB guns at summer camp?" The group erupted in laughter, and Sarah felt her confidence wavering. These men were supposed to be professionals, but they were treating her like a joke before she had even had a chance to prove herself. Commander Rodriguez stepped in, his voice carrying a warning edge. "That's enough, Sergeant Thompson. I want you to run Miss Martinez through the basic safety protocols and let her take a few shots with one of the training rifles." Thompson's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." For the next hour, Thompson grudgingly walked Sarah through the fundamentals of the rifle she would be using, a standard M24 sniper system. He explained the scope adjustments, the proper shooting positions, and the safety procedures with the air of someone going through the motions rather than genuinely teaching. Throughout the instruction, the other SEALs continued to make comments under their breath. Sarah caught fragments of their conversations, words like waste of time and publicity stunt, that made her even more determined to prove them wrong. As Thompson finished his explanation, he handed Sarah the rifle with obvious reluctance. "All right, let's see what you can do. Targets at 300 meters. Try not to embarrass yourself." Sarah accepted the rifle, feeling its weight and balance. It was heavier than the rifles she was used to, but the fundamentals were the same. She settled into the prone position, adjusting her body alignment and finding her natural point of aim. The range fell quiet as Sarah prepared for her first shot. She could feel the eyes of every person in the building watching her, waiting for her to fail. Through the scope, she could see the target clearly. A standard military silhouette, with scoring rings clearly marked. Sarah controlled her breathing, just as her father had taught her years ago. She felt her heart rate slow and her muscles relax as she entered the focused state that had become second nature to her. The world narrowed to just her, the rifle, and the target 300 meters away. Her finger found the trigger, and she began applying pressure with the same smooth, consistent motion she had practiced thousands of times. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed through the range. Through the spotting scope, Thompson could see exactly where the bullet had struck. His expression changed from skepticism to surprise as he announced the result. "Center mass," he said, his voice lacking its earlier mockery. "Good shot." Sarah smiled slightly, but she wasn't finished. She cycled the bolt and prepared for her second shot, making a small adjustment to her scope based on what she had observed from the first round. The second shot followed quickly, and once again, Thompson's voice rang out across the range. "Dead center. That's 2 for 2. The chuckling and whispered comments from the other SEALs had stopped completely. Sarah could feel the atmosphere in the room shifting as she prepared for her third shot. This time, she didn't rush. She took her time, reading the wind flags and making minute adjustments to her aim point. The third shot was even better than the first two, striking the target in almost exactly the same location as the second round. The group of watching SEALs had moved closer to the shooting bench, their skepticism beginning to transform into genuine interest. "Okay," Thompson said, his tone noticeably more respectful. "That was pretty good shooting. Want to try a longer distance?" Sarah looked up from the scope, her confidence growing with each successful shot. "I'd like that." Commander Rodriguez, who had been watching the entire demonstration with growing interest, stepped forward. "Let's move to the 600-meter line." The 600-meter range was significantly more challenging. At that distance, factors like wind speed, temperature, and bullet drop became much more critical. Even experienced marksmen struggled to maintain accuracy at such ranges without extensive practice with the specific rifle and ammunition combination. As Sarah settled into position at the new distance, she could hear the SEALs placing quiet bets among themselves about whether she would even hit the target. The target itself was barely visible to the naked eye, appearing as little more than a small, dark shape against the backdrop. Thompson, now serving as her spotter, provided wind speed and direction information. Sarah listened carefully, making mental calculations that would have challenged many military marksmen. She adjusted her scope settings and settled into her shooting position. The first shot at 600 meters was more difficult than anything she had attempted at the 300-meter line. The bullet had to travel twice as far, giving wind and other environmental factors more time to affect its trajectory. Sarah took her time, controlling her breathing and waiting for the perfect moment to break the shot. The rifle fired, and for a moment, there was complete silence, as everyone waited for Thompson to announce the result. Through his spotting scope, Thompson could see a fresh bullet hole in the target, well within the scoring rings. "Hit," he announced, and Sarah could hear genuine surprise in his voice. "That's a solid hit at 600. Hope sighed, but Sarah wasn't satisfied with just hitting the target. She wanted to show these elite warriors that her shooting at 300 meters hadn't been luck. She cycled the bolt and prepared for her second shot at the extended range. This time, she made a small adjustment based on what she had observed from the first shot. The wind had shifted slightly, and she compensated accordingly. The second shot felt perfect as it broke, and she knew immediately that it had been better than the first. "Center mass again," Thompson called out, and now his tone carried a note of respect that hadn't been there before. "That's damn good shooting." The atmosphere on the range had completely changed. The SEALs, who had been making jokes and dismissive comments, were now watching Sarah with the kind of attention they normally reserved for their own instructors. Even Commander Rodriguez looked impressed as he observed the demonstration. "One more?" Sarah asked, looking up at Thompson with a small smile. Thompson nodded, and this time, when he provided wind and environmental information, he did so with the same professional courtesy he would show to any accomplished marksman. Sarah prepared for her third shot, feeling more confident than she had since arriving at the base. The third shot was her best yet, striking the target in nearly the same location as the second round. The tight grouping of her 3 shots would have been impressive for an experienced military sniper, let alone a teenage civilian. As Sarah set down the rifle, the range erupted in quiet conversation among the SEALs. Their earlier dismissiveness had been replaced by genuine curiosity about this young woman who had just demonstrated shooting skills that rivaled their own. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" one of the younger SEALs asked, approaching Sarah with obvious interest. "My dad taught me," Sarah replied simply. "We've been shooting together since I was little." Thompson, who had gone from skeptical to respectful over the course of the demonstration, extended his hand to Sarah. "I owe you an apology," he said. "That was some impressive shooting. I haven't seen civilian marksmanship like that in a long time." Commander Rodriguez stepped forward, clearly pleased with how the demonstration had progressed. "Miss Martinez, I think you've made quite an impression on our team here. Would you be interested in trying some of our other rifle systems?" Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement. "I'd love to, sir." As the group began preparing for the next phase of the demonstration, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She had faced their skepticism and proven herself through performance rather than words. The laughing and dismissive comments had stopped, replaced by genuine professional interest in her abilities. But she had no idea that the real test was yet to come, and that before the day was over, she would face a challenge that would push her skills to their absolute limit and earn her a place in the memory of every person present. The next phase of the demonstration moved to an even more advanced section of the range complex. Commander Rodriguez led the group to a specialized facility that housed the military's heavy sniper systems, weapons designed for extreme long-range engagement and anti-material purposes. The building itself was more secure than the previous range, with additional safety protocols and restricted access. As they entered the heavy weapons range, Sarah's eyes immediately fell upon a rifle unlike anything she had ever seen before. Mounted on a reinforced shooting bench was an M107 Barrett, a massive semi-automatic rifle chambered in .50 BMG. The weapon looked almost science fiction-like in its proportions, with its distinctive muzzle brake and intimidating presence. "That," said Thompson, noticing Sarah's fascination, "is the Barrett M107. 50 caliber, semi-automatic, effective range out to 2,000 meters and beyond. It's designed to take out vehicles, equipment, and other hard targets." Sarah approached the rifle with obvious reverence. Even without touching it, she could see that this weapon represented a completely different category of marksmanship challenge. The .50 BMG cartridge was enormous compared to anything she had ever fired, and the rifle itself probably weighed more than some of the complete firearms she was used to shooting. "Have you ever fired anything like this before?" asked Corporal Davis, one of the younger SEALs who had been watching Sarah's performance with growing interest. "No," Sarah admitted honestly. "The largest caliber I've shot is .308 Winchester. This is definitely new territory for me." The group of SEALs exchanged glances. While they had been impressed by Sarah's performance with the standard sniper rifle, the Barrett represented an entirely different challenge. The recoil was massive, the trajectory was different, and the weapon required experience and technique that took most military marksmen months to master. Sergeant Thompson stepped forward, and Sarah could see that some of his earlier skepticism had returned. "Look, Sarah, you've shown that you can really shoot, and I respect that. But this isn't just a bigger rifle. The Barrett is a completely different animal. The recoil alone can injure inexperienced shooters, and the margin for error is much smaller." Commander Rodriguez consulted his watch and the range schedule. "We do have time allocated for Barrett demonstration, and Miss Martinez did specifically request to try our different weapon systems." "Sir," Thompson said carefully, "with respect, I think we should stick to the lighter rifles. The Barrett requires specialized training, and we have liability concerns with civilian shooters." Sarah could feel the momentum of the day shifting. The respect she had earned through her earlier performance was being overshadowed by legitimate safety concerns about the massive rifle. She understood their hesitation, but she also felt a burning desire to prove that her skills could translate to any weapon system. "I understand the concerns," Sarah said quietly, "but I'd really like to try. Even if it's just one shot. I promise to follow all safety instructions exactly." The debate continued for several minutes, with the SEALs discussing the pros and cons among themselves. Finally, Commander Rodriguez made the decision that would define the rest of the day. "We'll proceed with the demonstration," he announced, "but we'll take extra safety precautions, and Sergeant Thompson will provide detailed instruction before Miss Martinez attempts any shots." The next hour was spent in intensive preparation. Thompson, now taking his instructor role seriously, walked Sarah through every aspect of the Barrett system. He explained the massive recoil impulse, the proper body positioning to absorb the shock, and the advanced ballistic calculations required for the heavy .50 caliber projectile. The ammunition itself was impressive to behold. Each .50 BMG cartridge was nearly as long as Sarah's hand, with a bullet that looked more like a small artillery shell than traditional rifle ammunition. Thompson explained how the heavy bullet maintained its velocity and energy over extreme distances, making the Barrett effective at ranges that would challenge any other rifle system. "The key," Thompson explained, "is understanding that everything is amplified with this system. Small mistakes in technique that might cost you a few inches with a standard rifle can cost you feet with the Barrett. The scope adjustments are different, the hold requirements are different, and the follow-through is critical because of the recoil." Sarah listened intently to every word, asking detailed questions that demonstrated her understanding of the principles involved. Her questions impressed the SEALs, who recognized that she was thinking like a serious marksman, rather than just someone excited to shoot a big rifle. The target for the Barrett demonstration was set at 1,000 meters, twice the distance she had shot successfully with the standard rifle. At that range, the target appeared as little more than a tiny speck, even through the powerful scope mounted on the Barrett. As Sarah settled into position behind the massive rifle, she immediately noticed the differences Thompson had described. The rifle was much heavier and more cumbersome than anything she had previously used. The scope picture was clearer and more detailed, but the target still seemed impossibly small and distant. The shooting position itself required significant adjustment. The Barrett's recoil was legendary, even among experienced military marksmen, and proper body alignment was crucial to avoid injury. Thompson positioned Sarah carefully, ensuring that her body would absorb and redirect the recoil forces safely. "Take your time," Thompson advised, now speaking to her with the same respect he would show to any student marksman. "This isn't about speed. It's about precision and technique." Sarah nodded, settling into the unfamiliar but carefully instructed position. Through the scope, she could see the target clearly, though it looked impossibly small at the 1,000-meter distance. She began the mental calculations required for the shot, considering wind speed, temperature, bullet drop, and all the other factors that affected long-range precision shooting. The wind was particularly challenging that day, with variable speeds and changing directions that required constant attention. Sarah spent several minutes observing the wind flags and natural indicators before feeling confident in her calculations. As she prepared for the shot, the range fell completely silent. Even the SEALs, who had been maintaining casual conversation throughout the earlier demonstrations, were now focused entirely on what was about to happen. The Barrett M107 was their weapon, the tool they relied on for their most challenging shots, and they were curious to see how this teenage civilian would handle it. Sarah's breathing settled into the controlled pattern she had practiced thousands of times. Despite the unfamiliarity of the weapon system, the fundamentals of marksmanship remained the same. She found her natural point of aim, verified her scope settings, and began the careful trigger squeeze that would send the massive .50 caliber bullet downrange. The Barrett fired with a sound unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The muzzle blast was enormous. The recoil was jarring even through her careful preparation, and the concussion seemed to shake the entire building. For a moment, Sarah was disoriented by the sheer violence of the weapon's discharge. Through the spotting scope, Thompson was already searching for the bullet's impact. At 1,000 meters, it took a moment for the heavy bullet to reach the target, and everyone waited in tense silence for the result. "Miss," Thompson announced, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely disappointed. "About 2 feet high and 1 foot left. Not bad for a first shot with the Barrett." Sarah was disappointed but not discouraged. The miss was substantial, but she had learned from it. The recoil had been different from what she expected, and she now understood how the massive rifle behaved when fired. "Can I try again?" she asked, already beginning to analyze what had gone wrong with the first shot. Thompson looked to Commander Rodriguez, who nodded approval. "One more shot. Take your time and make the necessary adjustments." Sarah cycled the Barrett's action, chambering a fresh .50 caliber round. This time, she made corrections based on what she had observed from the first shot. She adjusted her scope settings slightly and modified her hold to account for the wind conditions she had observed. More importantly, she now knew what to expect from the recoil and muzzle blast. She positioned herself even more carefully, ensuring that her body was properly aligned to handle the massive forces generated by the rifle. The second shot felt different as it broke. Sarah's trigger control was smoother, her follow-through was better, and her overall technique had adapted to the unique characteristics of the Barrett system. The rifle fired with the same earth-shaking blast, but this time Sarah was prepared for it. "Hit!" Thompson called out, his voice carrying genuine excitement. "That's a solid hit at 1,000 meters." The group of watching SEALs erupted in surprised conversation. A hit at 1,000 meters with the Barrett was challenging even for experienced military marksmen, and for a civilian shooter to achieve it on only her second attempt was genuinely remarkable. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had proven she could hit the target, but she wanted to demonstrate that her first hit hadn't been luck. She cycled the action again, chambering her third and final .50 caliber round. This time, her preparation was even more methodical. She had now fired the Barrett twice and understood its characteristics. She made minor adjustments to her scope setting and prepared for what she hoped would be her best shot yet. The third shot was everything Sarah had hoped for. Her technique was polished, her calculations were precise, and her execution was flawless. The Barrett fired with its characteristic thunder, but Sarah barely noticed the recoil as she maintained perfect follow-through. "Center mass!" Thompson shouted, his professional composure finally cracking. "That's dead center at 1,000 meters." The reaction from the SEALs was immediate and unprecedented. These elite warriors, who rarely showed emotion about anything, were actually cheering for a teenage civilian shooter. The transformation was complete. From skeptical mockery to genuine respect and admiration, Corporal Davis approached Sarah as she set down the Barrett. His expression one of total amazement. "I've been shooting the Barrett for 3 years, and I've never seen anyone pick it up that fast. How did you do that?" Sarah smiled, finally allowing herself to feel pride in what she had accomplished. "I just tried to apply the same fundamentals my dad taught me. The rifle is different, but the principles are the same." Commander Rodriguez stepped forward, clearly impressed by what he had witnessed. "Miss Martinez, in 20 years of overseeing marksmanship training, I've never seen a civilian demonstrate that level of adaptability. You've shown remarkable skill today." Thompson, who had begun the day as Sarah's biggest skeptic, now approached her with what could only be described as reverence. "Sarah, I need to apologize again. When you walked in here this morning, I thought we were wasting our time with some kind of publicity stunt. I was completely wrong." "You were just doing your job," Sarah replied graciously. "I understand why you were skeptical." "No," Thompson said firmly. "I should have judged you by your shooting, not by your age or appearance. You've taught us all something today about making assumptions." The atmosphere in the range had completely transformed from the morning's tension and skepticism. The SEALs were now treating Sarah as a fellow marksman, asking her about her training methods, and discussing advanced shooting techniques with genuine interest. As the formal demonstration concluded, Corporal Davis approached Commander Rodriguez with an unusual request. "Sir, we've got one more rifle system that Miss Martinez might be interested in trying." Commander Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind, Corporal?" "The competition Barrett," Davis said with a grin. "The one we use for the annual inter-service sniper competition. If she's interested in a real challenge." Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement, though she tried to remain composed. The competition Barrett was a specially modified version of the standard M107, tuned for maximum accuracy and equipped with the finest optics available. It was the rifle used by military marksmen when absolute precision was required. "What kind of challenge are we talking about?" Sarah asked, her competitive instincts fully engaged. Thompson and Davis exchanged glances, and Sarah could see them communicating silently. Finally, Thompson spoke up with a proposal that would define the rest of her day. 1,500 meters, he said simply. "Our current base record at that distance was set last year during qualification training. If you're interested in trying to beat it, we'd be honored to spot for you." Sarah felt her heart racing with excitement and nervousness. 1,500 meters was an extreme distance, challenging even for the most experienced military snipers. But the opportunity to attempt such a shot with a precision-tuned Barrett was irresistible. "I'd love to try," she said, her voice barely concealing her excitement. As the group began preparing for this ultimate challenge, none of them realized that they were about to witness shooting that would become legendary within the naval special warfare community, a performance that would be talked about for years to come. The competition Barrett was housed in a separate, climate-controlled vault within the range complex. As Corporal Davis unlocked the heavy door, Sarah caught her first glimpse of what was arguably one of the finest precision rifles in the world. This wasn't just a military weapon. It was a work of art dedicated to the pursuit of perfect accuracy. The rifle itself appeared similar to the standard Barrett she had just fired, but closer inspection revealed numerous modifications and improvements. The barrel was custom-made, the trigger was precision-tuned, and every component had been carefully selected and assembled by master gunsmiths. The scope mounted on top was worth more than many cars, a piece of optical perfection capable of resolving detail at distances that pushed the limits of physics. "This rifle," explained Sergeant Thompson with obvious pride, "holds the current base record at 1,500 meters. Staff Sergeant Williams set it during last year's inter-service competition. 5 shots, all within a 12-inch circle. Nobody has come close to matching it since then." Sarah examined the rifle with the reverence it deserved, but her mind was already working on the challenge ahead. 1,500 meters was nearly a mile, a distance where factors like the Earth's rotation became significant variables in the ballistic equation. At that range, the slightest error in calculation or technique would result in a complete miss. Commander Rodriguez consulted with the range safety officers and verified that the extreme distance range was clear and ready for use. The 1,500-meter range was the facility's longest, requiring special safety protocols and extensive coordination to ensure no personnel were in the danger area. As the group moved to the extreme range, Sarah could feel the magnitude of what she was attempting. This wasn't just about shooting accurately. She was challenging a record set by one of the military's finest marksmen, using equipment she had never seen before today. The pressure was enormous, but she found herself energized rather than intimidated by the challenge. The setup process for the extreme range shot was meticulous. Thompson and Davis worked together to establish the perfect shooting position, adjusting the rifle rest, and ensuring that every detail was optimized for maximum accuracy. They consulted weather monitoring equipment to get precise readings on wind speed, direction, temperature, and humidity. At this distance, Thompson explained, we're dealing with factors that don't matter at shorter ranges. Temperature affects bullet velocity, humidity affects bullet drag, and even the barometric pressure influences trajectory. Everything has to be perfect. Sarah absorbed every detail of their preparation, understanding that this level of precision shooting was as much science as it was art. She watched as they made complex calculations using ballistic software, accounting for variables she had never previously considered. The target itself was barely visible even through the powerful spotting scopes. At 1,500 meters, the standard silhouette target appeared as little more than a dark smudge against the hillside. Through the competition Barrett scope, Sarah could make out the target clearly, but it still seemed impossibly small and distant. The current record is 5 shots within 12 inches, Davis reminded her. That's roughly the size of a dinner plate at that distance. Staff Sergeant Williams is a legend around here, and that record was the culmination of years of training and experience. End quote. Sarah nodded, beginning to understand the true magnitude of what she was attempting. This wasn't just about hitting the target. She was trying to achieve a level of precision that had taken a career military marksman years to accomplish. As she settled into position behind the competition Barrett, Sarah noticed immediately that this rifle felt different from the standard version she had fired earlier. Every component was perfectly balanced. The trigger broke with glass-like precision, and the scope picture was crystal clear, even at the extreme magnification required for the 1,500-meter shot. Take all the time you need, Thompson advised, now serving as her primary spotter. At this distance, patience is more important than speed. Williams took nearly 30 minutes to fire his record group. Sarah began her preparation with the same methodical approach she had learned from her father, but adapted to the extreme precision required for this shot. She studied the wind flags at multiple distances, observing how the wind patterns changed between her position and the target. She verified her scope settings multiple times and made minute adjustments based on the environmental conditions. The first shot was crucial. At 1,500 meters, she would learn as much from where the bullet impacted as from whether it hit the target. Even a miss would provide valuable information about how her calculations and the rifle's performance matched the actual conditions. Sarah's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that had become second nature to her. Despite the pressure of the moment and the watching eyes of some of the military's finest marksmen, she felt calm and focused. This was what she lived for, the moment when everything else disappeared except her, the rifle, and the target. The competition Barrett fired with a sound that was both familiar and different from the standard version. The recoil was softer despite the identical cartridge, testament to the superior engineering and modifications that had gone into the rifle's construction. Sarah maintained perfect follow-through, keeping her sight picture stable as the massive bullet began its journey downrange. At 1,500 meters, there was a significant delay between firing and impact. The 50 caliber bullet took nearly 2 seconds to reach the target, traveling at speeds that dropped from over 2,500 feet per second at the muzzle to roughly 1,800 feet per second at impact. "Hit!" Thompson called out, his voice carrying excitement and disbelief. "That's a solid hit at 1,500 meters." The group of watching SEALs erupted in amazed conversation. A hit at that extreme distance was impressive under any circumstances. But for a civilian shooter, attempting it for the first time was genuinely extraordinary. But Sarah was already analyzing the shot, studying Thompson's description of where the bullet had impacted. She could see through her scope that the hit was good, but not perfect. She had the information she needed to improve on the second shot. "How close to center?" she asked, already making mental calculations for her next attempt. Thompson consulted the spotting scope more carefully. "About 8 inches high and 4 inches right. That's actually an excellent first shot at this distance." Sarah nodded, using the information to refine her aim point for the second shot. The slight error was within the range of normal variation for extreme distance shooting, and now she had a precise reference point for improvement. The second shot was even more carefully prepared than the first. Sarah made minor scope adjustments and refined her hold based on what she had learned from the initial round. She took even more time studying the wind conditions, waiting for a moment when the flags showed consistent conditions between her position and the target. When she finally fired the second shot, it felt perfect. Her technique had adapted completely to the competition Barrett's characteristics, and her calculations had been refined by the feedback from the first round. The bullet's flight seemed to take forever. But when Thompson announced the result, his voice was filled with genuine awe. "Dead center," he shouted. "That's a perfect hit at 1,500 meters. Now, even Commander Rodriguez was showing excitement, and the gathered SEALs were reacting as if they were witnessing history in the making. 2 shots, 2 hits at extreme distance, with the second shot being essentially perfect. Sarah was in a zone now, the state of complete focus that serious marksmen dream of achieving. Everything was working perfectly. Her technique, her calculations, and her mental state. She prepared for the third shot with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The third shot was a duplicate of the second, striking the target in virtually the same location. The fourth shot was equally precise. As Sarah prepared for her fifth and final shot, she realized she was within reach of something truly special. 4 shots, all within about 6 inches, Thompson reported, his professional composure completely abandoned. "If this last shot is anywhere close to the others, you're going to shatter Williams's record." Sarah tried not to think about the implications as she prepared for her final shot. She focused on the same methodical process she had used for the previous 4 rounds, refusing to let the pressure of the moment affect her technique. The 5th shot felt identical to the previous 4. Her position was perfect, her breathing was controlled, and her trigger squeeze was smooth and consistent. The competition Barrett fired with the same thunderous report, sending its final bullet on the long journey to the distant target. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Through his spotting scope, Thompson was studying the target carefully, taking time to verify what he was seeing before making his announcement. 5 shots, he finally called out, his voice barely containing his amazement. All within a circle that measures less than 8 inches. That's a new base record. The range erupted in cheering and celebration as the significance of what had just happened sank in. Sarah Martinez, a 17-year-old civilian shooter, had just broken a record set by one of the military's finest marksmen, using a weapon she had never fired before today. Commander Rodriguez approached Sarah with an expression of total disbelief and respect. "Miss Martinez, in 30 years of military service, I have never seen anything like what you just accomplished. You've set a new standard that will be talked about for decades to come." The SEALs were surrounding Sarah now, asking her about her technique and expressing their amazement at what they had witnessed. These elite warriors, who had begun the day skeptical of her presence, were now treating her like a legend. Sergeant Thompson, who had been her harshest critic that morning, approached with an expression of profound respect. "Sarah, I don't know how to apologize for how we treated you when you arrived. We judged you before giving you a chance to show what you could do." "You don't need to apologize," Sarah replied graciously. "You were protecting your standards and your training time. I respect that." "No," Thompson said firmly. "What you've shown us today goes beyond just shooting. You've demonstrated professionalism, grace under pressure, and skill that rivals anyone I've ever worked with. You've earned our respect completely." As word spread throughout the base about what had happened, Personnel from other units began arriving to meet the teenager who had broken their sniper record. Sarah found herself surrounded by some of the military's finest marksmen, all eager to discuss techniques and learn from her approach. The day that had begun with skepticism and dismissive laughter had transformed into something entirely different. Sarah had not only proven herself, she had established a new standard of excellence that would inspire military marksmen for years to come. Commander Rodriguez made arrangements for Sarah's achievement to be officially documented and recorded in the base's training records. Her name would be permanently associated with the extreme range marksmanship record, a distinction she would carry for the rest of her life. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a small-town gun shop in Texas to breaking records at one of the military's most elite training facilities, it had been a day that exceeded her wildest dreams. But perhaps the most meaningful part of the experience was the transformation she had witnessed in the people around her. The SEALs who had laughed at her that morning were now treating her as an equal, a fellow warrior in the pursuit of marksmanship excellence. "What's next for you?" Corporal Davis asked, as the day's activities began winding down. Sarah smiled, still processing everything that had happened. "I'm not sure yet, but after today, I know that whatever it is, I won't let anyone tell me I can't do it." As she prepared to leave the base that evening, Sarah carried with her not just the satisfaction of breaking a seemingly impossible record, but the knowledge that she had proven something important about perseverance, skill, and the danger of making assumptions about people based on their appearance. The SEALs who had dismissed her that morning watched her leave with newfound respect, knowing they had witnessed something truly special. They had learned as much about themselves as they had about marksmanship, and none of them would ever again underestimate someone based on age or appearance. Sarah Martinez had arrived that morning as an unknown teenager hoping to learn from military marksmen. She left as a record holder and an inspiration to everyone she had encountered. Her story would be told and retold throughout the military community, serving as a reminder that excellence can come from the most unexpected places. The laughter and skepticism of the morning had been replaced by admiration and respect, earned through performance rather than words. And somewhere in Texas, Sarah's father was about to receive a phone call that would make him prouder than he had ever imagined possible.